Welcome to another episode of A Cuppa with a Conversationalist. My name is Con. I am the Conversationalist, and as always, I have my latte in tow. Today, I'm very privileged to have an industry heavyweight on the program. My guest on today's program is CEO of Harcourts in South Australia, Rachel Eckey. Rachel has a diverse background in business, real estate, and government, and has worked with teams throughout Australia, as well as in Europe and Canada. Rachel spent a decade in strategic communications and business leadership roles before joining the real estate industry 13 years ago. Harcourts are a values-driven real estate company who have been market leaders in South Australia for many years and are leading the charge to change the perception of real estate agents by focusing on their clients, not themselves. Rachel is also the Charitable Foundation Ambassador for the Harcourts Foundation and has been involved in dozens of grants to community groups across Australia. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Absolute pleasure to have you. Rachel, I'd love to, first of all, your introduction is you've got a diverse background, and for the benefit of the audience, can you share some of your roles that you did have abroad? Sure. So I lived in Paris and in Canada, and I also did spend a couple of years in Alice Springs, which, depending on your viewpoint, can be argued as a fairly different location to metropolitan South Australia. And all of those taught me very different things. So in Alice Springs, I worked for the local government. I was the one-woman media and communications department for their local government there. And for a small town of, I think at the time, 28,000 people, they sure had a lot happening. So that was that one. And then in Paris, I was there for a year. That was really, I just was dying to get out of Australia and see the world. I moved to France without speaking the language. So I had to learn that once I got there. And again, communications-wise, that was a pretty interesting experience. And then Canada, I was there for a good 3 years or so. And that was when I first stepped into real estate.
Okay. And what real estate role did you have when you were in Canada?
I worked as an executive for a luxury builder there. So it was actually the builder. In Canada, they do similar to what you would have probably seen across Australia, and I know in other countries as well, with the hospital home lotteries.
Oh, yes.
So they give away the $100, well, you buy the $100 lottery ticket, and then the grand prize is like a big show home. The builder that I worked for there was the builder of those properties. So that was one of the interesting aspects of my role there. I was actually a few times on live Canadian TV giving away properties. And so it wasn't your, it was your new build real estate that I was involved in there. But my first role when I first moved to Canada, I was looking for marketing type roles. That was more of my background at that stage and wasn't able to find any. And so I did work as a general manager for a gym there for a year or so as well, which was also very interesting. So pretty diverse. I've sort of done the fitness industry. I did work in tourism for a small period of time, government, and then went to the new builds first. And actually, it's funny, in Canada, I used to say to the team there, our biggest competitor isn't the other builder. It's not why would you build with us instead of the other builder. It's the resale market. I mean, why build at all? And so then, ironically, I guess I crossed enemy lines when I moved back to Australia and joined a company that deals only in the resale market.
So there's something that you missed out on your little bio there. You're a TV personality as well. You're a media
temporary
celebrity.
TV personality of 13, circa 11 to 13 years ago. That's right. And it's actually very interesting. I would say as a leader of real estate, I would be one of the minority in terms of I've actually myself never listed and sold a property. So I've never worked frontline in real estate. But I do joke, well, I haven't listed and sold a property, but I have given one away live on national TV. So I feel like that counts for something. And actually, my favorite story from that was once, I mean, an interesting fact for you is that of all the ones I gave away, I want to say 8, so we used to do 2 per year. No one moved into them. Everyone sells them, which is a shame because I always thought at the time, if I was given a property of that caliber, I would live in it just for a year, just to say that I lived in a house like that, just to have that experience. But my favorite one was when I gave one away. At the time, this was 2011. So it was a $2 million property then. So probably $5 million in today's market. So like a significant property. And it was this lovely older couple who won it. And the woman was not impressed. And she said, I said, congratulations, you've won this beautiful home. She said, oh, look, I'm really sorry. I don't think we can take it because we've got these 2 pet cows and the council won't allow them to live in the backyard there. So there's me on with my big smile. And I was like, okay, well, congratulations. Thinking these 2 pet cows. And she was like, I don't need your, multi-million-dollar property. I've got my cows to think of. So that was probably my favorite. She was really nice about it. And obviously she won it anyway and she sold it. And, so she got something out of it. But she was like, somebody think of the cows.
Most parents are thinking about moving and they involve the children and, what are we going to do with the kids? And can the kids, she's worried about cows. How funny.
The cows, that's right. Yeah.
Tell me, obviously very, very diverse in what you've done. What were some of the key skills that you learnt or you developed, which have been, I guess, the most beneficial in your current role?
The most beneficial, and this started from my first role out of university, was the one in Alice Springs. And it was communication in terms of being able to communicate your ideas effectively and succinctly, specifically in a public forum. So one of the key parts of my role there that I really had no training on before I got there was I used to write all the speeches for the mayor and the CEO. And so you quickly learn that what you write down it doesn't sound the same necessarily when someone says it. You tend to write far more formally. And some of those issues, they were dealing with a lot of sort of political hot topics at the time. There were attacks from dingoes on tourists, and there were some alcohol issues, and there were some welfare issues, and there was a lot of very hot topics. And so distilling those down into, what you might call like political type messages where they're short and sharp and easily able to be picked up on the media, that was a skill that I didn't have any training for before doing that role. But given that that was my very first role, I really took that into everything else that I did. And it doesn't have to be a large audience. I mean, a meeting at work with a couple of colleagues, if you're able to succinctly express what you're trying to say in a way that they actually can uptake that information, that to me has been the most valuable skill that I learned. And again, in France, I didn't speak the language. So trying to be honest, a lot of French people speak quite good English. And it was a big win for me after about 6 months when I would speak in French to someone and they would actually reply in French, because for a long time I think they were like, stop, we'll just speak English because you're hurting my ears. But in France, that was another thing. I mean, when you're trying to communicate another language, I mean, you've got a limited vocabulary at your disposal. How are you able to distill what you're trying to say into enough words to have cut through? So that, to me, even though they've been diverse, that's always been probably the leading skill set that's been needed. And even more so now, I mean, at Harcourts, we have over 30 offices in South Australia where I am. And, they span this sort of a 2.5 hour gap from the one at the one side of the city to the one at the other side of the city. And they're all individually franchise owned. So I oversee all of them, but they've got their own leaders. They've got their own cultures. You could say we've got sort of 30 subcultures within the broader culture. And so how are you able to communicate messages to almost 500 people operating under almost 30 different leaders, or more than 30 different leaders, and kind of be able to communicate that message in a meaningful way?
Yeah, definitely a challenge. Your role as CEO now, there obviously was let's call it an apprenticeship leading up to that time. What did you find in terms of, obviously you learnt a lot of skills, you learnt a lot in the roles that you were in. What did you identify were potentially some, we'll call it skills gap, that you needed to develop and or build on for you to fit into this role of CEO?
I'm tempted to answer that in what was expected of me versus what I have so far been doing. And there is a little bit of an expectation with this level of role, and I can speak definitely of this industry, I'm not sure about other industries, of I'll call it a cloak and dagger style of communication, game playing, maneuvering and trying to get short-term wins, or trying to let someone else think they've got a short-term win for your longer-term gain, that kind of thing. And that was certainly not a skill set that I had needed to deploy previously, and it was an expectation. For my part, I actually pushed back against that, and I openly say this to people. Like, I am telling you, I am being upfront, and it's your choice whether you choose to do that back. But for me, it's actually better for everyone if we openly state what we're actually trying to achieve out of this interaction or this relationship or this deal or whatever it is that we're working on. So for me, that wasn't a skill set I had, and it actually was one that I pushed back on being willing to develop. Not that you need to think strategically and you need to be aware of what the possibilities are. And certainly I'm not naive enough to think that everyone operates that way. But in my experience, it's been received as a welcome breath of fresh air to just say what you really mean and what you really are looking to achieve. And if that doesn't align with what someone else is looking to achieve, let's save everybody some time.
Which it's really interesting. You're right. We talk about what do you really mean? Like, what's your point? What's your objective here?
Yeah.
And the lack of transparency in certain negotiations, it just makes it difficult for everybody. It's just wasting time. It's wasting energy, wasting resources potentially. And I can see how it would be indeed a breath of fresh air, particularly, and I say this with respect, particularly coming from a female. Blokes can be a little bit more, okay, cut the garbage. What's your point? Where are we going with this? And it can be perceived differently coming from gender biased or gender based. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
You've already spoken about one of them, but I was curious. You would have faced challenges both internally and externally in terms of perceptions about your fit for the role or indeed your ability to do the role. You've spoken about, obviously, this cloak and dagger thing that you needed to work through. What were some of the other challenges that you faced both internally within the organisation and then potentially externally, whether that's industry related or other areas?
Let me start off with probably externally and industry related. I mean, I am not the typical gender or age for someone in this role, and that is a perception issue. And my view on that has been to just basically keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I'm not going to play that card, but I'm not going to shy away from it either. Internally, to be honest, I didn't really have that issue because I had quite established relationships here. So prior to being in the role I'm in now, I've been with the company for some years prior in other roles. And so the question of ability and relationship building was sort of already there. That wasn't internally too much of an issue. As I have to say, one of the things that I myself, as my own internal challenge, grappled with was that sense of, you probably almost call it imposter syndrome. And I had, in previous roles, particularly in my early 20s, been aware that I was at the time I was in marketing. So I was the young marketing girl in the room. And so you sort of start playing a certain role to factor into that. And inevitably there are sort of expectations that you mold yourself to because you receive benefit for that. You know, if you behave in the way that people expect you to most of the time, particularly your superiors, that actually is comforting to them. They don't really necessarily need you in that role to be challenging their perceptions. And one of the things that I internally did struggle with was stopping doing that when it wasn't serving me anymore. You know, it actually did not serve me to be the nice, quiet girl who made sure everybody else had coffee. That was never my role in the first place, and it certainly isn't now. You know, my role now is to lead and come up with strategy and make hard decisions. And once I let go of the persona that had been sort of become habitual for me, I found that a lot easier. Does that?
Yeah, the people pleaser.
The people pleaser, which I think a lot of people, I mean, we're social creatures. We're built to want to be liked by other people, because if you think about if we're all in the wild, it'd be pretty hard to survive on your own, right? So you do need other people around. But when you're given a role in leadership, I mean, your job is to lead, not to try and make everybody like you. I'm not a politician. They don't vote me in.
Yeah, let's not talk about politicians.
Sorry.
Rachel, I think you are being horribly unjust and unfair to yourself to even put you in the same conversation with a politician. I get the leadership thing, and it's a case of you try and please everybody and you please nobody. And you're right. You're not there to please. You're there to lead. You're there to lead the organisation through now and into the future. And unfortunately, the reality in business is there will always be, I use this term nicely, casualties, so to speak. People won't fit in within the culture or your beliefs. They won't share. And so it's just natural attrition.
Mm-hmm.
In your bio, you mentioned Harcourts are leading the charge to change the perception of real estate agents by focusing on their clients, not themselves. It's a broad statement. Do you want to care to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I probably don't need to elaborate on what the general public's perception of real estate agents is. I think everyone's probably pretty au fait with that. From a Harcourts view, I mean, we are very much a value-driven company, and that means internally, but also externally. So our values are people first, doing the right thing, being courageous, fun and laughter. And doing the right thing is something we actively, I say train on, you don't need to train people to do the right thing, but we actively drill in through every training session. So every leadership session that I have with our franchise owners or with international managing director, we start every session with those values. And every training session that we do here, I mean, one of our common phrases here is there is never a right time to do the wrong thing. And conversely, I like to say the reverse of that, which is actually there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. There is never a wrong time to do the right thing by somebody else. And in terms of real estate, I mean, there's a lot of, I argue that a lot of real estate companies are becoming marketing companies. And what are they marketing, right? It's actually not your property or you, it's themselves. And certainly you, as a sales consultant, as an agent in the industry, you do need to have that community presence and that profile, but never at the expense of doing the right thing by the client that you're looking after right now. So us being a values-led organization, it's sort of internal, but also very much external and actually focusing on what do our clients want. I mean, what we want is to be known as the finest experience in real estate. And that means helping people achieve what they're looking for as much as possible. The tricky thing with real estate, and one of the things that contributes to the perception of real estate agents is, there can only be one winner in each transaction. In terms of buyers, ideally you've got two, the person who's selling the property and the person who's buying the property. But in the market we're seeing right now, particularly in South Australia, there's not as many properties on the market now as there were 12 months ago or 2 years ago, but the buyer demand is still very high. So for any one property, I mean, I've had agents who have 22 offers on a property in a single day.
Wow.
And from that, I mean, one of them is going to be the successful one, and 21 people saw themselves being able to live in that home and have been disappointed. And so a lot of the unwelcome feelings that come when you think of real estate agents come with that feeling of missing out. Yeah. And there's always a thought of, well, what could I have done differently? What could have they done differently? Did they tell me the truth? And so you're never, again, back to our point before, you're never going to be able to please everyone. But if you know in your own heart that you've done the right thing and you've told the truth and you've put people first at all times, then the outcomes of people being unhappy is something that you do have to learn to live with.
Yeah, that's, you're right. And in this market, and I will get to that in a little while, there can only be one successful purchaser. So there are people that are going to miss out, and that goes with buying and or renting. One of the things from a business perspective, and you've kind of touched on this, but I'd be curious what your advice would be, or perhaps, obviously there's real estate agents who are coming into the industry and into Harcourts and into other organisations. Our ability to distinguish and differentiate ourselves in the market is key, because as we know, in most cases, or in a lot of cases, a vendor is going to speak to more than one agent unless there's some sort of a relationship. And so what separates, other than our fee or other really grey metrics, what distinguishes a Harcourts agent, or what would you be telling one of your agents when they go, Rachel, what what do I say to people when they say, so why should I go with you? What's your unique perspective on why I should appoint you as my agent?
And the specific answer to that question varies depending on who the agent is.
Of course.
But look, I do understand generally, what are the points of difference between agents? And I would say price is actually probably the worst one to compare, because you tend to get what you pay for.
Yeah.
I'd almost liken it to, I haven't thought this analogy through, so I'm going to say it, and then when I get to the end of it, it might not work. But I'd almost liken it to a car purchase. I mean, you can get a car that's going to get you from A to B, and there are very different price points in that. But how luxurious is that, right? How well do they take care of you? Real estate's a little different, because if you get the right agent, they're taking you maybe to C instead of B.
Yeah.
So, the price outcome is heavily determined by the agent that you use. First of all, their network and the people who would be interested in your property specifically, that they're able to connect you with this one. The other is their knowledge. The better knowledge and more local and more knowledgeable about that specific area that they are, the better outcome that you are going to get. Imagine if your real estate consultant is someone that lives in the same suburb, walks the same streets, their kids go to the same school. You can imagine the types of conversations they are able to have with buyers coming through that home. They can actually sell the location of the home as well as the home. And the other is, the professionalism that goes behind the branding. As I said, real estate companies are in some sense marketing companies, and the way that they market your property is going to be attract certain kind of buyers more than others. So it does come down to experience. I'd say probably experience, local, and then having tools and resources behind them. So as an example, being part of Harcourts, they have access to 30 other offices in South Australia and 400 other offices in Australia. And as we've experienced here, and I'm sure in other markets, a lot of the buyers and buyer interest comes from interstate and overseas. And so if you do have someone that can connect into those networks, but not for every property.
Sure.
A lot of them are, their families selling to families, and that's all very local. But it depends what you're looking for, and you'll know that yourself from your own style of property. Do you need it? Is it a larger property? Is it an investment type property? Are you looking for investors, or are you looking for the family down the road? And the benefit of, I guess, Harcourts specifically, or any known brand in real estate really, is that you've got those options. You'll have that local real estate agent who, does walk past their house every day with their coffee from the local deli. And you'll also have probably in the same office someone that does, the international buyers and that have the interstate connections and everything like that. So that's probably where specifically I would say a Harcourts point of difference is. But when you yourself are, I would always encourage you to get more than one, unless you've got a really long-standing relationship and you've used them before. Assuming you're coming from a standing start, I would probably ask for at least 3, because they'll all tell you different things and they'll all point out different features on your home. Price-wise, hopefully they'll be in a similar ballpark. And one of the things that I find confuses clients very much is when people are miles apart. If you get 3 people in and they're all pretty close together, you're choosing based on their knowledge, their expertise, but also a lot of it is to do with, do you connect with them as a person? You can't underestimate that people sell to people. And if you connect with them as a person and you bought your home in the first place, the next buyer who's probably similar to you will also connect to this person. So if they're just like a totally different kettle of fish to you, who are they attracting to work with them? And even in a transaction as large as property, which is the single biggest asset that most people own, or more likely to own, you still tend to buy from people. And, we have players in our market here who, I've had people say, well, I won't go to their open inspection because I just don't like that person. Not from Harcourts, from other places. But, I just won't go there. It doesn't matter how good the house is. I don't like that person. I don't want to deal with them, which is crazy. You're talking about a house for you to live in. You have to deal with this person a couple of times and then you get the house. But on it, you can't override human nature, honestly.
People deal with people to the extent that they know, like, and trust them.
That's exactly right.
Always has been, always will be. And, one of the things that I, share with people is your ability. The things that you just pointed out are really important, like, and they're things that a lot of people wouldn't think of straight up. If you the lowest common denominator is typically price. And that's the first place they go, but it's the last place they should. Yes. Network. Who do you know? You know, the knowledge of and your expertise. You've pointed those things out, and they're great. What is missed by a lot of people in a sales environment is their ability to be able to build rapport and build trust before you even get to fees and, you know, the process and everything else. And it's just lost.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
It's lost. People, like you said, people buy from people. You know, if you're a 7 foot tall real estate agent and you're going to visit Mrs. Jones, who's 93 and she's about 4'2", you standing within an inch of her isn't really going to help you build rapport.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
And a lot of people in sales just miss that. They think it's about the product, and it's not. It is, but it's not. Really interesting. And that's some valuable stuff there.
And actually, just before you move on, I mean, one of our most successful agents here in South Australia, he is so good at that building rapport and connection. I mean, he's a great guy. Mm-hmm. He does his whole, you know, appraisal, come in, see the property, meet the people, talk through what he would do, the way he would approach it, what he thinks it's worth, the whole thing. And then at the end, when you get to the inevitable fee conversation, he actually gives them a range from low range to a pretty premium range. And he just says, here's the range that I'm willing to work within, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You make a decision about what you would like, what you think that I'm worth. And they can either make that up front then and say, we want this, or he says, you wait till I bring you the buyer, wait till the price is done, and then you pay me. You know, we'll leave it on the contract here open. You pay me what you believe this is worth. And you know what? 19 times out of 20, they pay him the premium of that. And that to me epitomizes that, right? I mean, price is the lowest possible thing that you can compete on. And the other thing in real estate pricing is like it's all done on percentage, right? So what's your commission as a percentage? I would encourage people to convert that to dollars. I mean, it sounds like a lot when you talk about 0.5% more or less, but when you convert that into dollars and what do you believe they can achieve on a sale price on your home, it's actually not that much, right? It sounds like a lot, but once you convert it over, you know, do you believe that Mr. X, who's charging a premium rate, will get you more than that amount on your property? And if they will, then, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
So true, so true. The housing market has gone nuts. It's fair to say that if anybody had have predicted 5-6 years ago, or 5-6 years ago said this is where we'll be, there would have been very few people, if any, and the ones that did, they probably would have been locked up. But yet, hey, here we are. Where do you see it going in the short to medium term? Because from an outsider, and I don't have real estate expertise and don't profess to, but I just see that given all the factors, interest rates, affordability, cost of living, et cetera, this can't be sustainable, or can it?
It comes down to a question of supply and demand, ultimately. It's only sustainable insofar as people continue to be looking to buy properties. I agree there is significant affordability issues, particularly on the rental side. There is a shortage of supply there. In the short term, the rental side, I don't see that being alleviated. Because again, you've got a certain number of properties and you've got a certain number of people that want to live in those properties, and the price will be determined on that level of competition. And that is something that is probably more macro than any individual real estate company to be able to influence or even estimate at, because it depends on so much else. I mean, what do we have in terms of local projects attracting new workers? What's the government's migration policy? They've done some in South Australia. We've just had rental reforms come out that actually make it probably more challenging to be a landlord, and that will actually possibly encourage landlords to say, this is too hard, I'm just going to sell it. And that's actually a rental property that you've lost from the market, unless they sell it to another investor and it kind of gets put back into the pool. So the rental side, I don't see that changing in the near future. The sales side, it's hard to predict. I mean, we are seeing less properties on the market, which tells you that people are starting to have that natural hesitation. Yes, you can sell high, but you've got to buy high as well. But the pool of buyers hasn't reduced. We still have so many people trying to buy properties. There are people that I talk to that have been trying for 2 years to secure a property. And, they go along to auction after auction, to weekend after weekend, and keep missing out, but they're still in the market. So until the demand for properties reduces, I can't see the pricing. I want to say bottoming out. In South Australia, we actually have a very resilient market. I don't believe it bottom out. I don't believe we're going to have a significant correction. I think it will slow down at some point. But in South Australia, we've sort of always had this little growth curve like this. We don't tend to do the up and down of the eastern states specifically. I couldn't tell you about broader beyond here. Real estate, like so many industries, is a supply and demand thing, and it's sometimes hard to predict consumer behaviour.
Are you seeing, and again, out of curiosity, really, are you seeing a great an increase, or what's the behaviour like from interstate buyers and or overseas for that matter? Is it higher?
It's actually, I would say probably it's slowed down in the last 3 to 6 months, but it was very high, particularly interstate post-COVID. We saw a lot of interest in Adelaide as an investment option or as an option to move to because of the affordability here versus some of the larger cities, because of the lifestyle here, because we didn't have quite so many restrictions and lockdowns, or just because it's easy to get an investment property. So we did have a pretty strong interest from interstate. I would say that slowed down a little bit because our pricing has actually outpaced the eastern states. So we're not necessarily over where their average sale price is, but our areas have increased so much faster than theirs. So when they start looking at it, it doesn't make sense.
No, some of the prices just crazy.
It's absolutely crazy.
Rachel, this is where I ask you to pull out your crystal ball. And the crystal ball and the the little headwear and all that sort of stuff. Where do you see, I guess, the industry, or what significant changes, if any, do you see in the industry in the next 5 years? And or what are some of the biggest challenges the industry is going to face?
Let me start with where do I see it heading. What I've noticed is a desire and a trend towards more hyper-local. So, and my view on this is that it actually probably follows a little bit of the anti-establishment sentiment that we're seeing worldwide at the moment, where people want to feel more locally connected in their own community. So there was a phase, probably if you go back 10 years ago in real estate, where it was all about, look how big we are, big, fancy, a lot of people working here, a lot of people driving fancy cars, and therefore we are the trusted experts. We are the people that you need to trust. Whereas now we're actually your local, your mum and dad, we know the area. Like that sort of has a lot bigger part to play in people's trust factors. And to me, that actually mirrors some of what we're seeing in not in real estate, but in other industries. And I know we don't want to get into that, into politics, say in America and France and some of those areas where people are actually leaning away from the sort of establishment and the idea of the sort of the big man, the corporate machine in the background. So for my part, in real estate, that's actually where the local franchise-owned offices are really great. I mean, they are, your mums and dads or your business partners from that local area, and then they just happen to have the backing and support and systems of this much larger network behind them, helping them to be better. And I think that's something we'll see continue. In terms of the biggest challenge of our industry, it's probably not unique to us. It's people. Having the right people in the right role. So recruitment, like manpower, things like property managers for managing rentals. There's a finite pool of talent that you're able to pull from. And like many other industries, there's a lot of competition for those people. So they tend to sort of get headhunted and move around a little bit. And again, like many other industries, the quality of your people is the quality of the service that you're able to offer.
Absolutely.
So for me, the biggest obstacle for any real estate company is attracting and retaining good quality people.
On that point, I'm curious, and it wasn't something that I was going to bring up, but it's kind of a bit of a segue. is obviously, well, not obviously, but recently there were some changes to remuneration for sales agents in terms of they had to be remunerated a minimum at some point. Yeah.
Yep.
How has that impacted the industry or organisations such as yours? Has it been a good thing, or has it been a negative thing?
It changed a little while ago, and I mean, just to explain that further. So in Australia, you can't. So let's compare this to New Zealand. In New Zealand, you can put on a sales consultant commission only. So if they don't sell anything, they just don't make any money. They don't get paid. In Australia, you can't do that. There is a minimum threshold they need to reach. They need to have reached that threshold in their earnings that they've taken home from their percentage that they get of their sales in any continuous 12-month period over the last, well, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 years. You'd have to look into the employment, but it doesn't matter. So they have to meet a certain threshold. Prior to that, you have to pay them. The threshold goes up every year. It's about mid-50s as a salary. The main impact that's had is it's made businesses more hesitant to bring new people into the industry. Prior to that, you could basically not cost you much, do some profiling and some training and some time investment there, and they could love it and go off and fly, or they could not enjoy it and leave, and it hasn't cost you much. Whereas now you really have to you have to legally have them on a salary. So it's really slowed down the rate of, you can imagine your average mum and dad business paying someone a salary of $55,000 is a reasonable investment. And given the rate of failure of people that have been in the industry for less than 2 years, you can probably go through 5 of those before you get one that sticks. And so what I find for our people is they go through 5 of those, they get one that sticks, they spend time and effort building them up, and then immediately everyone from competing areas are on the phone trying to poach this person, right? And so you can imagine the frustration. You've poured your own money and time and effort in, and then other people are trying to take them away. So It has reduced the rate of new people to the industry, which is a negative. But on a positive, it has also probably increased the quality of the people in the industry, because now there's a little higher barrier to entry. You have to convince someone to pay you that salary to get started, as opposed to, well, just go knock on some doors and we'll see how you do. Obviously, you have to be licensed and everything.
Yeah.
But, now that there is a barrier to someone actually having to invest money in you, it probably has made them more selective.
Yes, recruitment. It's everywhere. I hear it all the time. All the businesses that I speak to, whether it's real estate, I've got a very, very good mate of mine who's in the furniture industry. He's been facing the same challenge for many, many years. And it's getting good people. You invest time, money, and then for whatever reason, and retaining them is the real key. Yeah. Rachel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Your insights, sharing your journey, and from a leadership perspective. And as you said, certainly you are unique in terms of not your role, but being female, young, and in such a role. And I'm sure that will pave the way for many other young women to believe that it is achievable, and break down some of those barriers, and indeed your knowledge and what you've shared within the industry. I thank you very, very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You are very welcome.
My name is Con. I am the Conversationalist. My guest today has been Rachel Eckey, CEO of Harcourts South Australia. And until next time, bye for now.